meeting. I know for now it seems like we got low attendance, but I think that people will start to trickle in as the moments pass. I'm going to start the recording of the Zoom feed as well. So just let me get that started here. Okay. And it's recording now. So hey, Kay, can you hear me and see me and everything? Just checking in with you since I know it seems that you're here. Can you? Just let me know. Give me some feedback if so. Or maybe not. Hey there, Michaela. I see you on the YouTube live stream. And Michaela, welcome back. So good to see both. I'm just going to give it a few moments because there's still only a few of us that are here, but it seems like people are finding their way to the meeting now. I don't know what the real deal is because usually everybody's here. You can't hear me on Zoom, is that right? Can other people confirm whether or not on Zoom? Are you in the Zoom meeting? I just want to try and get our technical difficulties cleared away. I want to make sure that the Zoom meeting is functioning for people. They're saying that I'm not there on the Zoom? Oh, okay. I may have picked the wrong Zoom meeting. Okay, let me go back and try and stop that, okay? And get to the right meeting. Thank you guys, sorry. Okay, hold on 1 second. Okay, let me find the proper link. I think I may have just sent you guys, or I may have just clicked the wrong one myself. My bad. Okay, just takes a second. I'm trying to find the Zoom meeting. I must have clicked the wrong link and went to a different one of my Zoom meetings, and that's why we're having this mismatch. So my bad. Let me fix it. I'll get into the Zoom meeting. That was my intent. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Did I send, you know what? I'm thinking that I may have sent you guys the other link. So let me, okay. I have to like check this twice. What's the code on the Zoom link? That's what I'm a little confused about. Why I'm not able to sync up with you guys here. Maybe, okay. Is it this one? Let me try this one. Okay, there you guys are. Right? Let me make sure here. So is this our Zoom meeting, guys, that I was not present at first? Who's here in this one? Can you see me? Okay, sorry, I unmuted and started the video. Hi, guys. Okay, there we are. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, my bad. It was just a little mix-up with the link. I sent you guys a certain link, and I had intended it to be for the other class. I teach 2 of these classes back to back, and it seems that I gave you guys the link for the other course. But anyway, we're together now. Thanks, everyone. Sorry for the confusion there. That was just my mistake. So thanks, everybody. Okay, so anyway, I'm going to start the recording on the correct Zoom link now, so that we'll have that for our records if we want. Just let me get that going here. Okay, record. Cool. Thanks, guys, so much. Sorry for the, yeah, my bad. I usually never make these little errors, but that's something that I guess can sometimes happen. All right, then. So good. We're all together. And I'm doing the dual stream thing, as I have a couple of other times. So people can choose their stream format, and I'll be posting the video later for all of us to use. Okay, guys, so great. I think most all of you have probably been able to say something in the chat. If you haven't, whether it's YouTube or Zoom, make sure to leave a comment, and then that'll be my way to keep track of your presence here at the meeting. Okay, everybody. So thanks so much for being here, and I know you took the midterm last class, so thank you guys for all your hard work studying and getting prepared for the test. I'll be grading it right away, and my goal will be to try and get it back graded and finished by Tuesday. so that people can check on their grade and know how they stand in the course from there. The next thing that we are looking forward to after the midterm is a homework assignment, um, which is assignment number 2. Sorry, 1 second here. Yeah, assignment number 2 is a homework assignment that's originally listed in the schedule as due next Thursday, but I'm going to make it slightly later to give you guys a little more time because we have to develop some of the notes on chapter 5 before I feel like you'll be good to go to do it. So I'm going to probably modify it until the end of the day Friday or maybe the end of the day Saturday. But not to worry, I'll give you guys the update on that next Tuesday when we come back after the weekend. So you're going to have about 10 days from now for the next homework to be due. But I'll explain the details about the homework after we get through our meetings today. Okay, perfect. So we continue on through our course. We've covered a couple of interesting chapters in the book. We started with chapter 8, which had to do a lot with just basic concepts of logic. What is deduction? What is induction? What is validity, soundness, inductive strength? What are the different types of deductively valid forms of argument, and stuff like that. Then in chapter 1, we looked at the topic of some of these famous social psychology experiments that reveal some of the value of critical thinking. We talked about the qualities of a good critical thinker, the stages of cognitive development, what are some of the barriers and obstacles to being a good critical thinker, what are some of the benefits of it. And then in chapter 3, it was all about language and communication. What is language? What are different functions of language? What are different types of definitions and meanings? What are features of a good definition, different communication styles, rhetorical devices? And then chapter 4 was all about knowledge, which had to do with, what is knowledge? What is evidence? What is truth, belief, justification? What are some good places to go for doing research? How can you evaluate the testimony of experts? What are some unreliable sources of evidence? And then what are some cognitive and perceptual errors? And now we come to chapter 5 in our book. So today we're kicking that chapter off with the first lecture on it. And chapter 5 is all about what are called fallacies. Okay, fallacies. Just putting that in both chats. So fallacies are not good. Fallacies are when arguments have a logical error or a flaw. Okay, so obviously our class is all about learning how to become skilled at presenting arguments, evaluating them, and all the rest. And basically, not all arguments are created equal. Some are better than others. Some arguments are weak or invalid. Sometimes an argument has premises that don't support the conclusion in the proper way. And when an argument has a fallacy, a close inspection of it can show that it has one of these types of flaws. So let me just give the basic definition of fallacy here in the chat. Fallacy. When an argument has a logical flaw or error. Okay, so that's what a fallacy is. When an argument has a logical flaw or an error, we dub it as a fallacious argument, or we say that the argument itself is a fallacy. So the goal that we are going to have in the next 3 meetings, today and then both meetings next week, is to cover a broad range of different fallacies in a couple of different categories. So today we have one category of fallacies, which are called fallacies of ambiguity. And then on Tuesday, we learn about what are called fallacies of relevance. And then next Thursday, we'll talk about what they call fallacies of unwarranted assumption. And in total, there's going to be 20 of these different fallacies that we're going to try to learn about. And we'll have some homework assignments and quizzes and things that are all devoted to this topic. Okay, so let me begin some of the info in Chapter 5 by just kind of walking you through some of the little stories and anecdotes that they include there. Oh, and I have a DM in the Zoom, not to worry. Okay, yeah. So for Ashley, not to worry. Thank you. I'm glad that you're here. Okay, back to what I was saying. So in the top of Chapter 5, they have like a little real world example or story to kind of reinforce the lesson of the chapter. That was something we've seen in a couple of the other chapters too. Like in Chapter 1, they started off with reference to the Zimbardo and Milgram studies. In Chapter 3, they talked about the Benghazi scandal and how communication was not effective in that case. And then in chapter 4, they talked about these famous cases of medical error to give you a sense of how people can make mistakes when they try to process information. Now, in chapter 5, there's a little reference to a real world story. And so it starts off by telling us about a woman named Shannon Townsend. Okay, so Shannon Townsend was actually just a young high school student, and she was an honors high school student. So she's very good academically. And then she got into the University of Colorado for college. And in her first semester, she's doing really well with grades. She had a 3.9 GPA, and she was an honor student. But towards the end of her freshman year, something happened which was not so good. She got caught up and involved in this cult movement, which is known as the Brethren. The Brethren is run and supervised by this cult leader named Jim Roberts. And basically, what they ask you to do is to like cut off all ties with your friends and family members that are not members of the cult, and to abandon all your worldly possessions and just live communally with the other cult members. Anyway, since she did that, Shannon Townsend's never been seen again by her family and friends. And you may say, well, that's a terrible story and it seems like an isolated incident, but actually hundreds of college students and young people each year will do similar things, being recruited into dangerous cults that are devoted to mind control, excessive devotion to a single person or set of ideas. And you may wonder, well, how is it that a smart person, with their whole life ahead of them, can get recruited into these types of cults? And one of the ways that they will do that recruitment is by the use of fallacious arguments, which have the outward appearance of being credible and valid arguments, but in fact, they're not to be relied on, and they're deceptive in many cases. So cults prey on young people because, as you guys know, at your age, many young people just finding their adulthood for the first time struggle with the new independence that you've been given. You grow up in a household, until you're pretty much 18, and you're not given the full freedom and independence that adults have, right? Your life is regulated by your guardians, supervisors, parents, and all the rest. And then all of a sudden you're an adult and you have all this newfound freedom. And some people kind of struggle a little bit with how to manage that and with how to form their identity in the world now that they've got this kind of independence. And sometimes cults will use that sort of time period in one's life where they're struggling for independence and to find themselves as a sort of fertile ground for their recruitment efforts into the cult. And so lack of assertiveness, dependence on others, and an intolerance for ambiguity can all facilitate sliding away into some kind of dangerous group like this. And when they ask people who study cults what it is that makes it very hard for somebody to become recruited by a cult, they say, good critical thinking skills are the number one tool that makes it difficult for cults to make an appeal to you. And that's what it says here in the book. Clinical counselor and cult expert Ron Burks, he says that the best way to avoid being targeted by a cult, the antidote is critical thinking. Cults do not like people who are constantly thinking and asking questions. What a cult is relying on is for somebody to be just kind of naively agreeing with everything they say, like, wow, that's cool, I didn't know that, tell me more, instead of a person who says, are you really sure? What's the evidence? Can you prove that? What facts and studies do you have to really confirm the things that you're saying? Why do I trust it? So people that ask critical questions and insist on high standards of evidence are not the easiest subjects for cults to recruit. And we want to be those kind of people. So part of our skill set that we're building in the class will help us to be able to recognize fallacious arguments when we see them. And when we are able to identify a fallacious argument, we won't be tricked or deceived by it. We won't be a kind of person who takes it to be credible. And that means that we'll be less vulnerable to any attempts at manipulation, mind control, or suggestibility. So that's kind of some of the larger social value of being a good critical thinker when it comes to knowing about fallacies. Sometimes we commit fallacies in the way that we reason, in the way that we argue. We all could do a little bit better. And sometimes we are those that receive fallacious arguments from others. So we want to be able to do better in both counts, being better at not committing fallacies when we make reasonable arguments to people, and being able to spot and identify and to call out fallacious arguments when other people present them to us. But to do that, we have to know what they are and be able to recognize them. So knowledge is power here, and we're going to learn about some fallacies called ambiguity. So the first group of fallacies that I'm talking to you about today are called fallacies of ambiguity, and I'm going to give you the definition of that right now in the chat. So fallacies of ambiguity. This is when an argument contains ambiguous words, sloppy grammar, or a confusion between two similar concepts. So I'm going to write that now. Okay. And there you see it. Fallacies of ambiguity. When an argument contains ambiguous words, sloppy grammar, or perhaps a confusion between two similar concepts. Now, that's the general definition of the category of fallacies that we're learning about right now. But within the scope of that category, there are 5 different members. Okay, so let's make sure not to be confused. The word fallacy of ambiguity is not the name of a particular fallacy, it's the name of a category of fallacies. Just like the word mammal is not the name of a particular mammal, but a type. It's not the name of a particular animal, I should say, but a type of animal. Now, there are different individual mammals. There's Homo sapiens, bears, lions, tigers, but those are the members that fall within the scope of that umbrella term. So fallacy of ambiguity is the umbrella term, and there's 5 different individual members that fall within its scope. So what are the 5 members of the fallacy of ambiguity family, so to speak? I'm going to list the names of them first, and then we're going to go through each one by one, talk about them, and give examples. So here are the 5 fallacies of ambiguity. Okay, so the names of them are, first of all, equivocation. Okay, and then we have what is called the amphiboly fallacy. Third, there's what's called the fallacy of accent. And then there's 2 more that are kind of like very similar, but with slight little difference. There's the fallacy of division. And then last but not least, there is the fallacy of composition. Okay. Okay, so I'm just giving us the full menu of options here, and then we're going to zoom through each one of these definitions and give good discussion. Okay, so hopefully we're all clear on the same page here. We've got 5 fallacies of ambiguity, and our mission today is just to learn these 5 items. Equivocation, amphiboly, accent, division, and composition. So we'll start off with the first one, I guess, which is equivocation. And as usual, guys, anytime you have questions, comments, anything you'd like to do to break into the meeting, please let me know, and we'll just take them as they come. But all right, starting with equivocation. Here's the definition of it. So the equivocation fallacy happens when there's a key term in an argument that is used multiple times, but the problem is that the meaning of the term changes during the course of the argument, and that's what makes it a fallacy. So when a key term in an argument is used multiple times, and with different meanings. Okay, the equivocation fallacy. You see it in the chat typed out. When a key term in an argument is used multiple times and with different meanings. When we do that, we commit the fallacy of equivocation, and another way to say it is that we then equivocate on the meaning of the key term. So let me give an example to you of how this fallacy might happen. Let me write out an argument here, and it's going to just have 2 premises and then 1 conclusion. So it says this. I'm typing it premise by premise. Just give me a moment to do that. First premise says Joe is at the bank. Now, the second premise continues from there to say that a bank is a financial institution. So Joe's at a bank. Bank is a financial institution. So what should be the conclusion of this argument? If Joe's at a bank and a bank is a financial institution, the conclusion would seem to be that what? Therefore, it's a little elementary reasoning. Not too hard, I hope, this one. But let me know, somebody here in the chat. Joe's at the bank. Bank is a financial institution. Therefore, thus, it follows that. Consequently, what's the conclusion? Joe's at a financial institution. Therefore, okay, good. Yes, correct. Now, the argument at a first glance looks like it's unproblematic. It seems to be just a deductively valid argument in logic. Joe's at a bank. Bank's a financial institution. So where's Joe at a financial institution? But let's interrogate the argument a little further, because notice this, guys. A single word can have more than one meaning. We've kind of talked about that in our discussions of language from chapter 3, but it's something that I think we all know. When you look up a word in the dictionary, you're going to see a list of meanings, and there's going to be like a primary meaning listed first, but then other associated meanings will follow after that in the list. So like if you looked up the word square in the dictionary, the first definition might be about the geometric figure of the square. But as you go down, you might see another definition is, I don't know, like the town square where people congregate in the center of the city. Or maybe you'll see a slang usage even further down, like square, term referring to somebody who's not cool or whatever. So the single word square could be used in different ways with different meanings or senses. So looking at the argument that we have here, by the way, the conclusion, everybody, just to make sure that's not lost in the YouTube chat. Okay, so looking at the argument, guys, and the two premises, what is a term in there that you think could have multiple different meanings? Let me ask and see if anybody can spot the key term that I'm kind of gesturing at here in this current argument. What word maybe have different meanings? Okay, thanks, Jacob. Yes, the word bank. So what's one possible meaning of the word bank? Certainly, one meaning of the word bank is financial bank. So, like Wells Fargo, Bank of America. So we can say that that is bank, one sense of bank. It's financial. And Jeannie, you seem like you're already ahead of the game because you're hinting and guessing at what the other type of bank could be. Another type of bank, though, could be a piggy bank, or it could be the land over a river or lake. That's right, the edge of a river. It could be a blood bank, food bank, sperm bank, a bank shot in basketball, et cetera, et cetera. So let me just go ahead and let's assume that in the first premise, when it says Joe is at the bank, it's meant in a different sense of bank, not the financial sense, but let me write this here. Sense of bank, edge of a river. So if in the first premise it says Joe's at a bank, but what that really refers to is that he's fishing out at the Mississippi River banks, and then the second premise says a bank is a financial institution, does the conclusion follow anymore that Joe is at a financial institution? If we're saying bank in two different senses, in the first premise we mean riverbank, in the second premise we mean money bank. But if we've changed up the meaning of the term halfway through the argument, then you're right, Joe. Sorry, John, thanks. I'm thinking of the argument. You're right, John. In that case, the conclusion does not logically follow because we have modified the meaning of the key term halfway through the argument. We've equivocated on the word bank. So when you make arguments, you have to make sure that the words that are used in the argument are used in a uniform sense throughout the whole presentation of the argument. And when other people make arguments to you and they try to switch up the meaning of a key word or phrase within it, then you can say that's equivocation and the conclusion doesn't follow. That's a fallacy. Now, this example I gave you guys is a little bit of a silly example because, it's just about bank versus bank, different words, different meanings of the word bank. But there are more interesting examples of the equivocation fallacy than this that we can talk about. Let me give you a few from the book here. So here's one from the book, and what it says is, so imagine Carl and Juan are two friends, and they're having a little conversation about physician-assisted suicide. In other words, when a terminally ill patient wants to request to be put to death to put them out of their suffering and misery because they have an incurable illness and their life is very difficult. So Carl says to his friend Juan, Juan, terminally ill patients have a right to decide how and when they want to die. And Juan fires back, that's not true. There's no right to physician-assisted suicide in the US law. Now, what key term are they talking about? Both, but they're using in different ways. Carl says terminally ill patients have a right to decide how and when they want to die. Juan says, no, there's no right to that in the law. So what do you think is the difference, the word that's been used by both with different meanings? Yeah, that's right, the word right. Okay, that's correct, the word right. Now, when Carl says terminally ill patients have a right to decide how and when they want to die, what do you think his usage of the word right is intended to mean? Right in what sense? When somebody says, these people have a right to decide how and when they want to die. In what sense of the term? Like a human right. Good, Jeannie. It's like a moral right. What it means is someone ought to be allowed to have this freedom in a perfect world where we respect people's natural rights. But in Juan's way of saying it, where he says that there's no right to that in the law, he's using the word right in the legal sense. That's right, Jeannie. So what he says is not about whether someone morally ought to be able to do this, but whether as of yet the right has been established in the law. So one's talking about the sense of rights morally, and the other's talking about the sense of rights legally. So they really don't have a disagreement because they're talking about the word in different ways. They're talking past one another. Carl is basically saying people should be allowed to do this, and Juan is saying there's no law that allows them to do this, but that's a different point. Okay, here's another example from the book. So from 2010, back then Harry Reid was the Democratic leader of the Senate, and he had this quote. The quote was, if you're a man and you're out of work, you may beat up your wife. Now, a Fox News reporting team took this quote out of context, and they went in front of their viewers and they said, Senator Reid is terrible because he thinks it's okay for men that are out of work to beat up their wives. What a horrible thing to say. But the misunderstanding of the reporters comes from a different interpretation of a key word there. What is the word you think that they're seizing on and using differently? That's right, Michaela. It is the word may. So let's ask, what's one meaning of the word may? Not the month. Let's not say that. But when somebody says, if you're a man and you're out of work, you may beat up your wife, they could mean in the sense of permission, right? Like you're allowed to. You may do so. But another sense of the same word may is talking about it in the sense of what? Monica, you say possibility, or Rory, the same. Exactly. So one sense of may is permission. But, sorry, I meant to write it like this, may. Another sense of may is simply possibility. So anyway, when Senator Reid said that if you're a man and you're out of work, you may beat up your wife, he obviously, to be charitable, to be fair to the guy, what do you think he really intended by saying that? That there's permission to do it or that it's possible? If you're a man and you're out of work, you may beat up your wife. Just to say that it's possible, that the statistical probability in that demographic category, poor people, like there's higher incidences of domestic violence. That's all he's saying, that correlated with poverty are higher rates of domestic violence. He is not saying, go right ahead, it's fine with me, you may do that. But the Fox News reporting team, to make it sound like he was saying something sensational, misconstrued the statement as though what he was saying is, it's fine by me and you may do that. So we talk about may in these different ways. Sometimes the word can is the same. We talk about can in the sense of what I'm allowed to do versus what I'm able to do. Like if a person raises their hand in class and says, can I go to the bathroom? It would be like a smart aleck response for someone to be like, I don't know, can you? Right? Because the student asks, obviously, in the sense of, am I given permission? And if the person responds as though they had asked whether they're capable of doing it, that's a humorous sort of equivocation on the term can. Okay? Here's another example. And this one's a little bit more of a serious case. Okay, so like a Cal State Fullerton, another institution where I teach, sometimes I'm asked to teach the philosophy of sex and love, which is an interesting course. And we get into like the history of the topic of love and, the ethics of consent and things like that, sexual consent. Anyway, at one stage during that class, we talk about how sometimes there are equivocation fallacies committed when people make arguments about the concept of sexual consent. And let me just give you one example here. So, okay, now it's just an example of an argument that has to do with sexual consent. Here's the first premise. It says, if she consents to it, then it is permissible for me to have sex with her. And the second premise will then continue by saying, by not physically resisting me, she gave consent. Okay, so if she consents to it, then it's permissible for me to have sex with her. And by not physically resisting me, she did give consent. And so the conclusion would, at least on the surface, appear to be it was permissible for me to have sex with her. But looking at the argument one time, can any of you guys spot a key term, an important key term here, that is being used differently in the first and the second premise? Which one? Yes, the all-important term of consent. So in the first premise where it says, if a person gives consent, then it's permissible to proceed with the sexual act. What type of consent really does make it okay for an adult to have sex with another adult? What kind of consent do you think is mentioned in premise 1? What grants legitimacy to the act? What type of consent? Verbal consent, affirmative consent, like wanting it to happen by making it clear verbally or by some other clear token of consent. But in the second premise, what is described as consent is something much different. It's not a verbal authorization to proceed, but it's a failure to physically fight back or something. So the second one is a tacit form of consent, and the first premise is an explicit form of consent. But that does not lead to the conclusion that is given, because obviously when a person, let's say, doesn't say yes, but they also don't fight back, that's not really consent. There's all kinds of legitimate reasons that a person, for fear of their life or whatever, may want to not physically resist because they don't want to provoke a worse violent outburst from the rapist. So, just because consent grants legitimacy, yes, we can't then change the meaning of consent halfway through the statement or argument so as to make anything seem permissible. And this is a case of equivocation on the topic of consent. So, when people say we need consent, it's supposed to be explicit and authorized by a verbal act, not something that is interpreted by the other person by a failure to convey an answer of no. Okay, so like that's just another example of an equivocation fallacy where there's a little more on the line. Sometimes when you sign terms of service and stuff, you should really pay attention to the meaning of the words legally in those contractual agreements too, because sometimes what you think you're agreeing to is a different understanding of the definition that's given in those terms. So anyway, just a few things to think about as we talk about equivocation. Maybe one more example from the book. It says here, 2-year-old Katie is very tall. Her father, on the other hand, is not tall, but he's about average in height. Therefore, Katie is taller than her father. Obviously, that's not true. The word tall has been used in two different ways. On the one hand, to refer to tall for a 2-year-old, we say she's tall. When we talk about her father, we say he's not tall, but tall in this sense is being referred to as tall for an average adult male. And so just because she's tall for a 2-year-old girl and he's not tall for an adult male does not imply that, she's taller than him, because we're using the word in different senses in different contexts. And therefore, it would be a mistake to say she's tall, he's not, so therefore she's got more height than him. Okay, so if all that's good to go, then I guess we've covered equivocation, at least for the moment, in some detail. Now we're going to go ahead and talk about the next item, which is amphiboly. So, amphiboly fallacy, everybody, here's the definition. This is the fallacy of grammatical error. So this fallacy occurs when there is a grammatical mistake in an argument which allows for more than one conclusion to be drawn. Okay. Amphibole, when there is a grammatical mistake in an argument which allows more than one conclusion to be drawn. Um, so let's see. Here's an example that the book gives. Um, Sometimes grammatical ambiguity or error can happen when we do not know to whom a given pronoun attaches in the statement of an argument or just overall statement. So here's an example. So Terry Schiavo was a woman who had suffered a traumatic head injury in Florida back in the early 2000s. All right, and basically it destroyed her brain function, and she had no prospects for recovery from that. So no brain activity, and she was just been keeping. They were just keeping her alive on these extraordinary life support machines, without which she would have just passed away. Now, when that happened, there was a disagreement between members of her family and her husband about whether or not they should pull the plug. On one side, people thought, no, let's hold out hope that she could somehow recover. On the other side, the argument was scientifically and medically, she's totally brain dead and she's a vegetable, so she wouldn't have wanted to be sustained for so long on these life support machines. Let's let her rest in peace. So there was that disagreement. But listen to this statement here and see if you can tell me how it's ambiguous grammatically. So it says, Terry Schiavo's mother and her husband are on opposite sides of the battle over her life. Now, what's ambiguous there? Where it says Terry Schiavo's mother and her husband, are on opposite sides. We don't know who refers to. Let me ask you if you can think of this. Terry Schiavo's mother and her husband are on opposite sides here. So what's ambiguous about the way that is said in the sense of grammar? Schiavo's mother and her husband. We can't tell which word refers to what. Let me know. What's the word here that has an ambiguous reference? Thank you, Lisa. Yes, her, the word her. What we are not able to determine is who are the two parties that disagree. When it says her husband, her husband could refer to what person? Let me ask you, what two different people could the word her husband refer to? It could be the husband of the mother, yes, or it could be the husband of Schiavo herself. Based on the statement itself, we don't know. The grammar makes it ambiguous, and therefore we can't tell what conclusion to draw. Are we supposed to draw the conclusion that Schiavo's husband does not agree with the mother of Schiavo, or that Schiavo's parents don't agree among themselves, the mother of Schiavo and her husband? So without further clarification, it's just impossible to tell which individual is on opposite sides from Schiavo's mother. And that's what it says here in the book. It says, in this statement regarding the issue of whether to remove the feeding tube from brain-damaged Terry Schiavo, the ambiguous wording makes it unclear which conclusion follows. Is it Terry Schiavo's husband or her father, that is, her mother's husband, who is taking the opposite side? Well, in fact, it was Schiavo's husband that wanted to have the feeding tube removed, and her mother and father believed that she still had a chance to regain consciousnness. And she died in 2005, shortly after a federal court upheld the decision to disconnect the feeding tube. At first, Governor Jeb Bush sided with the parents and said that against the wishes of the husband, she should be kept on the life support machines. But a federal court intervened in 2005 and sided with Schiavo's husband and made the decision that yes, it would be in her interest and according to the legal rights of the husband that she should be disconnected. Anyway, there's one example. We can give you others that are just as simple based on the ambiguity of pronouns. What if I told you that Bill and Ted were chilling and they were just talking about his girlfriend? What's ambiguous there? Anybody can tell me. Bill and Ted were having a chat about his girlfriend, right? His. So the male pronoun his, it's just not clear to whom it refers because there's two different male subjects. So it's possible in that statement. Oh yes, a Bill and Ted reference. One of my favorite film sort of series. I don't know if you guys have seen all of them, but I've always been a big fan of The Bogus Journey out of all three. But the new one's pretty funny too, actually. Face the Music. Anyways, guys, side reference. But yeah, his. We just don't know whether the his is a reference to the first named male individual or the second. So in cases of amphiboly, either statements or arguments, you have to ask the person to grammatically clarify what they're saying. Who did you mean by that? Of course, nowadays we have a lot of talk about the use of the they pronoun as a gender neutral pronoun that does not affirm a more masculine or feminine identity. Um, and sometimes it's been pointed out that the word they can be ambiguous between the singular and the plural, which is true. I mean, in context, though, you're usually able to tell, but it's not always the case. What if somebody said, um, Julie was watching the soccer team and they were not having a good time at all? Um, the word they could be a reference to what or what? Let me know. Julie or the soccer team, right? So it could be a plural pronoun um, that refers to the team that's not doing well or that's not enjoying themselves, or it could be a reference to the chosen pronoun of Julie herself as they. And so in some of these cases, we just have to make sure that people can understand what we really mean and what we're talking about. And a little bit of grammatical clarification can just clear that away. Another example from the book. So the fragrance company Clinique made a fragrance called Happy. And in one of their advertising slogans, they have the statement, wear it and be happy. But the function of the word and is a little ambiguous because sometimes and is used to express a conjunction between two facts, just that one thing is true and so is the other. In other cases, and is used to express a causal connection, like I turn the key and the car starts, like meaning that by turning it, it causes it to start. But I could also just say, my name is Dr. Vulich and the Earth is the third planet from the sun. And those are just two separate facts that are not causally related to each other. Now, of course, the fragrance company is hoping that you'll take away the association that by wearing it, it'll cause you to be happy. Wear it and then you'll be happy. But if anybody, as the book says, it says, of course, the advertiser is hoping we'll fall for the fallacy and make the second interpretation. However, if we use the fragrance happy and we're not happy and try to sue for false advertising, we can be sure they'll say they never intended the term and to imply a causal connection. Instead, they'll claim they used and only as a conjunction between two unrelated ideas. Meanwhile, it's money out of our pockets and now we're less happy. Haha. Sometimes the amphiboly fallacy is used for humorous effect in like comedic dialogue in movies or in film or what have you. Here's an example from the 1996 comedy movie Spy Hard with Leslie Nielsen. So the agent says to the director, Director, we've intercepted a very disturbing satellite transmission from our listening post on the Rock of Gibraltar. And the director asks the agent, what is it? Agent answers, oh, well, it's this really big rock that sticks out of the water off the south coast of Spain. That's what it is. Now, if you followed the little back and forth there, the first statement from the agent was, we've intercepted this disturbing satellite transmission from our listening post on the Rock of Gibraltar. And when the director asks him, what is it? The ambiguity lies in the way he's asked, what is it? It could be in reference to the Rock of Gibraltar itself, or more obviously, to the content of the message that was intercepted from that location. And for humorous effect, we have the agent, misunderstand him as having asked, what is the Rock of Gibraltar, by asking, what is it, as opposed to what is the content of the satellite transmission. So when we use words like it or other pronouns, we just have to make sure that everybody's clear what the designated reference of the term is so that we don't leave people wondering what we've said or what we've really claimed. So there we have some info on the amphiboly fallacy, everybody. Okay, so if that's fine, I'm going to keep going and we're going to roll into the next one, which is the fallacy of accent. So the fallacy of accent is basically this. It's when the meaning of an argument changes based on which term or phrase within it is emphasized, okay? Okay, there we see the definition. When the meaning of an argument or statement changes based on which word or phrase within the argument or statement is emphasized. Now, here's something that's just interesting about language and speech. and writing, that we can change up the interpretation of a single statement by simply placing in stress on different parts of the statement. Um, that's sometimes called an accent or an inflection. In writing, we can see that done by the use of italics or bolding or sometimes all caps. In speech, it just happens by a change in the intonation of your voice. So let me give you this example just of a single sentence. I'm going to say this sentence in a flat monotone, and you'll understand what it means, but then I'm going to add emphasis to different parts of it, and we'll start to bring out different aspects of the way it's interpreted. So, what if I say to somebody, "Why did you steal my bike from me?" You understand it. I mean, that's a clear sentence of English. But what if I say it now without such a monotonous, flat tone, and I sort of bounce around with different words? So, if I say it like this, "Why did you steal my bike from me?" Now I add all the stress and accent to the word bike, and it sort of makes you think about the contrast between why did you take the bike of all the things that you could have taken? Why the bike, though? What if I say it now as this? Why did you steal my bike from me? Now the emphasis is all placed on the word you, as though I'm trying to indicate that of all people, why would you do that? I mean, I might have thought someone else would steal my bike, but you, really? Or what if I say, um, why did you steal my bike from me? Now I'm adding all the emphasis to the word steal, like, why didn't you just borrow it? Or why didn't you buy a bike? Or why didn't you ask me? Or something like that. Um, why did you steal my bike from me? Now the emphasis is on me. Like, I know you're a bike thief, but couldn't you have stolen it from some other person aside from me? So notice that the single statement here has a different sort of color or um, vibe, at least based on which word or phrase within it that we emphasize. And sometimes that's useful for effective communication, but in other cases, it can result in a miscommunication or a failure to correctly understand someone's original statement. So here's an example from the book that gives us that kind of example. So, okay, imagine this scenario here. Mother comes home, sees the daughter, um, and sees that the daughter's got like ash all over her, and notices that the, like, I don't know, tool shed out back has been burned down to the ground. And it's clearly that the daughter has done this. So the mother is upset and she looks at the daughter and says, "What did you do? Didn't I tell you don't play with matches?" And the daughter says back to her, "Yes, mom, but I wasn't playing with the matches. I was using them to burn down the shed. So no problem, right?" Now, what word did the daughter accent to sort of change or modify the meaning of the mother's rule? The word playing, right. So by adding all that stress and hanging on the word playing, it's like she's trying to say, well, I thought what you were saying is as long as I'm not playing games with the matches, I'm allowed to use them. But when the mother says don't play with matches, what do you think was really intended by the use of the terms don't play with matches? What does that mean in reality? It means just don't use them at all, don't touch them, don't light the matches. The daughter now has tried to get around the rule by saying, well, I wasn't playing with the matches. I was, there's no games here. I'm doing science experiments or I'm just committing arson. This is not a game. This is no fun. But obviously, that's not a correct understanding, and it's elicited, by the accent. I can think of other examples like that. So the parent doesn't want the child to hang out with a certain friend. They see him hanging out with that friend. Um, that's funny, Kylie. Yeah, you know, the mother sees, or the parent, whatever, sees the child hanging out with a friend they don't like, and so when they have a moment with the kid, they say, "Hey, look, I'm sorry to say this, but I don't like that kid, and you shouldn't be hanging out with them. So, as far as I'm going to tell you, I don't ever want them to walk through these doors again of this house. Okay, you understand? Don't ever let them in this through these doors again." So next day, parent sees the child in the room hanging out with a friend again. They call him over, like, "What are you doing? I just told you about what I wanted." What do you think the child's going to say if it's going to be an accent fallacy? If you follow my little narrative there, Mom originally said, "I don't ever want him coming through the door again." Yeah, so she said, "Well, I know, Mom, but you said don't let him through the door. That's why I let them climb up through the window, so I didn't break the rule." Obviously, though, when the mother says the statement offhand, "Don't ever let him in this door again," they don't just mean, okay, as long as they go through the garage or through the windows or some other entry point, that's okay, just not the door specifically. That's obviously not what the person meant. But by accenting and adding a stress to the term door, it makes it seem as though it was a narrower interpretation than what the parent actually intended. Here's another case from the book. So school newspaper says they're going to crack down on off-campus drinking. Student says, okay, I'm glad they're going to crack down on off-campus drinking. So it means that they're okay with me drinking on campus. Nice. So I'm just going to bring a flask to school. But obviously, when they say we're cracking down on off-campus drinking, they don't mean to imply that only off-campus drinking is prohibited. That means that, school events and other things where you're not necessarily on campus are also going to have drinking restrictions on top of the ones that apply to the campus itself. Now, these are kind of funny examples, right? But sometimes there could be a little bit more on the line when this type of fallacy is committed. And another case that's mentioned in the book here is going back to that topic of cults that we started with at the beginning of the meeting today. So sometimes what cults will do to try and win recruits is to lean on people's already existing religious beliefs as a sort of foot in the door to getting them more involved with the cult and their ideas. And one way to do this is what is called proof texting. The word proof texting refers to taking passages of the Bible out of context so that you can claim that they support whatever you're saying for your own purposes. So like as an example here, the Brethren, the cult led by Jim Roberts, to get people to join, they would say, look, okay, you're a Christian, right? So I'm sure that you've read the Bible, and it says in the Bible, Luke 14:33, so likewise, whosoever of you that forsaketh not all that he hath cannot be my disciple. What do you think it means? It says right there, whosoever of you that forsaketh not all that he hath. All that he hath. That means you got to give up all your worldly possessions, friends, and family, and join the brethren. I mean, so it's pretty clear, isn't it? But there you go. The accent was placed out of context on those simple phrases, all that he hath. And that makes it seem as though the cult's message is consistent with the words of the Bible. Or in another example, they could say, it says clearly here in the Bible that thou shalt be thy brother's keeper. Thy brother's keeper. Who do you think are the brothers? We're the brethren. So it's a hidden message telling you to join the brethren. So follow us. But obviously, that's a taken out of context accent that's applied to the scriptures. And in that case, it's a way of manipulating the person's religious affiliation so that you can win the support or allegiance to some other set of ideas. So anyway, guys, if you're not sure which term is being emphasized or accented in an argument, ask the person that made the argument to repeat or explain what they meant. And if you suspect that a certain claim, statement, or argument has been taken out of context, go back and look up the original. As an example, if somebody tries to quote biblical phrases out of context, maybe you would go back to the Bible itself and try and read it in the larger context within which it appears in the overall work. So there we have the accent fallacy, a third one to add to our growing, expanding roster of concepts and fallacies. So there's just two more then for today. We've got what's called the fallacy of division and a fallacy of composition. So first, let's do division. So the fallacy of division happens when somebody incorrectly assumes that the characteristics of a group are also a feature of each member of a group. So okay. Here you see the definition for fallacy of division. So one erroneously, that just means in error. One erroneously infers. Yes? Do I hear a microphone? Is that just a quick glitch? Not to worry. But back to what I was saying. So one erroneously infers that a characteristic of a group is a characteristic of each member of the group. Not necessarily true. And there's a form that the division fallacy takes. So I'm just going to show you the form. The form that it takes is like this. Group G has characteristic C. Okay, that's the first premise of our little division fallacy format. Group G has characteristic C. Second premise line would say X is a member of G. And therefore, the conclusion would seem to be that therefore X, the individual member of G, has the same characteristic that the whole group has. C. That's just not necessarily true in all cases. So let's give some examples. So take the group men as group G. Men are taller than women on average. That's just a statistical fact, right? Average male height, I think, is like 5'11", and an average female height, something like 5'5". Anyway, men are taller than women. Now I tell you, Danny DeVito is a man. And so that would imply, according to the fallacy, that what? Men are taller than women. DeVito is a man. So therefore, conclusion, someone let me know. Just plugging in for X and C. Therefore, Danny DeVito is taller than women. Now, this is an example from the book. I don't know if Danny DeVito is the most well-known comedian or actor to you guys, but he's very short, okay? He's been around for a long time. He currently, I think, still appears in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, the long-running comedy sitcom. But anyway, he's like 4'11", and so he's shorter than the average woman. Just because he's a man and men overall are taller than women doesn't mean that each man within the set of men has that same characteristic feature. If you want a different example, I don't know, how tall is Kevin Hart? Is he short enough to be shorter than your average woman? Then we could have used him as a more modern example. I don't know. But anyway, there you go. How about this? My family is very loud, and I am a member of that family, so therefore I'm loud. But that's not necessarily true either, right? You can have a loud family overall, which has at least a few members that are a little more shy or withdrawn or less socially outward. So there's another possible case. Let's see here. Sometimes people, when they think in terms of stereotypes, they'll reason in this way. I don't want to repeat any negative stereotypes because those are bad, but a sort of positive stereotype that sometimes is used and which is mentioned in the book is that Canadians are thought to be nice, generally, very helpful, willing to offer advice, assistance, and so on. So the nice reputation of Canadians is the first premise. Canadians are nice people. Derek is from Canada, and therefore Derek is nice. Again, maybe, but you have to judge people on an individual basis, even if they're a member of a group which has some kind of larger overall reputation or characteristic feature. Yeah, so let me think of other cases. Maybe, the Lakers are, I don't know. I got to think about this. So the Milwaukee Bucks are the NBA champions, and say that there's a member of the team that just got drafted after the last season, and then you say he or whatever is a champion in the NBA. That's not necessarily true because this person could have been acquired by the team after the championship was won. So even though the team as a whole has the banner up there hanging in the rafters, that doesn't mean that every single member of the team is necessarily an NBA champion, at least not currently. Okay, so other examples. Let me think here. The hotel is large. Room 101 is one of the rooms in the hotel, and therefore room 101 is large. But that's not necessarily true either. You can have a large hotel that's got a lot of small rooms. And I'll just hit you with maybe one or two others just to close this off. So let's see. The United States is the wealthiest country in the world. That's true. You are a citizen of the United States. So you are the wealthiest person in the world or one of the wealthiest people in the world. Does that follow? Certainly not. You can be a member of a country which has massive wealth when considered as a whole, but that does not necessarily mean that each individual part of the country has the same degree of wealth or power or whatever. Sometimes, as they say, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And in any case like that, a feature that the whole thing has is not necessarily seen in each part. One last. So I, Dr. Vulich, I'm visible to the naked eye. Like you can right now just see me without a microscope or a telescope or whatever. So I'm easy to see just by looking. Now, take a tiny cell from my body, like swabbed from the inside of my cheek. That's one of the parts of my body that makes me up. So therefore, the cell should be visible to the naked eye, according to the fallacy. But obviously, again, no. The whole thing, all the cells formed together is me. And that is easy to see with your eyes, but that does not mean that each individual component of the whole is visible to the naked eye in the same way. So these are all cases, guys, of the division fallacy. Uh, so yeah, then we got one more, and the last is composition. Now, composition and division are kind of like a package deal because they sort of go in opposite directions, but they have a very similar structure. So fallacy of composition here says this. One erroneously, again, infers. See how it's put here. Okay. Okay. With the fallacy of composition, one errs in the opposite direction. One erroneously infers that because a member of a group has a characteristic, that therefore the whole group has the characteristic. And the form of the composition fallacy looks like this. X is a, actually I'll put it here first in the Zoom chat. So X is a member of group G. X, the individual member, has characteristic C. So therefore, the conclusion would appear to be that group G, the whole group, has that characteristic. But that is, again, not to be concluded. That is a fallacious form of reasoning. Just pasting this to the other chat really fast. Oops, sorry. I meant to include the second premise. 1 second. That'll just take me a minute. Okay. Thanks for your patience there. Okay, got it. So looking at the form, the individual is a member of a group. The individual has a given feature, and so one concludes that the whole group has the feature. But again, no. The room 101 is one of the rooms of the hotel. Room 101 is small, so the hotel is small. No, you can have a big hotel with a lot of small rooms. A cell from my body is not visible without a microscope. So therefore, I am not visible without a microscope. Clearly false. How about this one? This is from the book. Sodium and chloride are highly toxic to human beings. Therefore, sodium chloride, the thing that is the composition of the two, is highly toxic to human beings. But no, sodium chloride is just a scientific name for table salt, NaCl, and that's a staple of everybody's diet that we eat every day. But it's interesting to know that when they're not combined together in that molecular compound, they're individually highly unstable and dangerous for us. But sodium chloride, when they're put together, are fine and well. So sometimes there are individual things which have features which are not seen in the larger composites that they form. Why do we call it division, division, and composition, composition? Because with the division fallacy, we start with a feature of a whole group, and then we divide down to saying that each member of the group has that same feature. With composition, we just build up from the opposite direction, starting with a claim about an individual and making a general conclusion about a whole group of which the individual is a part. So with division, we start with the group claim and finish with the individual claim. With composition, we start with a claim about an individual and use that as a basis to conclude something about a whole group. So division versus composition. So yeah, and I don't know, Dr. Vulich is a, let's see, Dr. Vulich is a professor, and Dr. Vulich knows how to play guitar. So therefore, professors all know how to play guitar. Not necessarily true. Just because I have that quality and I'm a member of a certain kind of group does not mean that necessarily the whole set of professors of which I'm a member has the same feature. So we are reminded by the composition fallacy not to jump to conclusions about a whole group just because we have information about some of its members or just one member. And we're reminded with division not to necessarily assign attributes to individuals that are parts of groups where the group has a feature that the individual may not have. Okay, so the football team is very aggressive. Smith is a member of the football team, so Smith is aggressive, not necessarily true. And on the other hand, I don't know. Let's see. Smith is the quarterback of the football team, so the whole team are quarterbacks. It doesn't follow either. All right, guys, so I guess this is really all I had to say to you. There's 5 fallacies that we were trying to learn today. They're all within the scope of what are called fallacies of ambiguity. As you remember, equivocation, amphiboly, accent, and then division and composition. So the only mission you have is to just know these facts, know this information about the 5 fallacies, add them to your knowledge, and then just be prepared later to be able to retrieve these facts. If I asked you, say, on a quiz or whatever, what fallacy is this? You'd be able to identify it by name. Or if I asked you to give an example of a fallacy with this name, then you'd be able to supply such an example based on the kind of cases that we've given here. Now, we've learned just 5 today. Next week, we have 15 more to learn. So there'll be 8 to learn on Tuesday. Those are what are called fallacies of relevance. And then there will be 7 more to learn on Thursday next week, which will be called fallacies of unwarranted assumption. The second homework, which I'm going to assign to you soon, it's going to not be due on Thursday as the calendar showed, but it's going to be due, I'm going to give you a little additional time, maybe to the end of the day, Friday or Saturday. But at any rate, what it's going to be is an exercise in your textbook, which asks you to look at a list of arguments and figure out which fallacy it is that's in each case. It'll be narrowed down to just 8 options, so that'll make it a little bit easier for you to make the right identification of each example. But I'll be assigning that to you, I think, after the next meeting, because we need to finish with the second group of fallacies before you're really ready to use them on the assignment, because the fallacies that are involved in the second homework are the ones that we'll cover on Tuesday. And that's part of the reason that I'm going to add some additional time for you. But yeah, that's about it. I don't have much more for everybody. So if you guys are good to go and everything's fine and you don't have any other questions, then I'll probably close our streams here pretty soon. How we doing? Is everybody good with that? Let me know. Give me some feedback. And if I see that you guys are all right and everyone's fine, then we'll be fine for today's meeting. Okay, perfect. Well, I appreciate you guys' attendance and everything else. I'll be posting the office hour link later today, probably around 2 o'clock. So if anyone wanted for any reason to swing by between 4 and 5, I'll be on Zoom. And then I'll post our recorded lecture tomorrow morning for this meeting, and then also the Zoom link for the upcoming Tuesday meeting. I'm sorry for the little difficulties we experienced at the beginning of today's meeting. My bad. Yeah, I just clicked the wrong Zoom link for my other class, and I was wondering where all the classmates were. So I'm glad that you guys were here for sure. But anyway, then have a great one. And if you ever need anything, as usual, just email me and I'll be in touch. Okay, then take it easy. And until next time, have a good weekend. Okay, I'm starting to, first of all, end the Zoom feed. So to the Zoomers, see you next time. Okay. And just a moment while I get to the YouTubers. Okay. So once again, everyone, appreciate all your hard work and attendance, and I'm just going to close the stream now. So see you next time, and stay safe, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.